Hi, my name's Dr Aly Norman and this is the FaceIT Home programme. Welcome to the second part of one of our videos looking at the creating and designing of the FaceIT Home tool. In the first video I talked you through the design process and showed you the basic content of the programme. Today we're going to be talking about how we developed this into a randomised control trial and tested its effectiveness for individuals with visible difference. So just to talk about the outline of the original programme, so we had 8 sessions. It started with an introduction to what we know about visible difference. This is a process of trying to normalise how people feel and the distress that people experience as a result of having a visible difference. Session 2 then moved on to looking at non-verbal communication skills, so how to use things like gestures and eye contact and smiling and posture in order to improve confidence within social interactions. And then this was built upon in the Session 3 by looking at verbal skills as well. We then had a session on Session 4 on goal setting. So this was helping people to set their bar at an appropriate level. So making sure that they were setting goals that were appropriate to their level of distress or to their level of disability. Making sure that they were able to achieve what they needed to achieve. And there were some bits in here that looked also at things like intimacy, for example, and how to deal with romantic relationships. We then moved on to a session on cognitive restructuring. So this was looking at negative body image for people with visible difference and how to help them to have a more positive body image. And it also looked at some of the assumptions that people make about people with visible differences, but also some of the assumptions that people with visible differences can sometimes make about the interactions they have with other people. So it talks about this idea that if you feel low about your own body image, then sometimes that can then feed into you assume that other people are thinking negatively about your body image as well. But also looking at things like safety behaviours and introducing this idea that sometimes the way that we behave in social situations may actually be exacerbating any kind of social problems that we may have when interacting. So, for example, things like wearing a baseball cap over the eyes will reduce eye contact and therefore make social interactions more difficult. Session 6 was then designed to bring a lot of this information together. So looking at how we use non-verbal and verbal communication skills together, teaching service users things like stock phrases, so things that they can say to individuals if they are asked about their appearance, so that they don't have to think on their feet. And then starts to introduce the idea of anxiety management. So for those of you who know about cognitive behavioural therapy, this is effectively the exposure element of it. But it starts off small in Section 6, looking at different ways of managing anxiety, and then moves into Session 7, where they're actually exposed to social situations that potentially might be problematic. And this is done in 2 different ways within Section 6 and 7. In Session 6, there are a series of videos where individuals can play out social scenarios and choose what they want to have happen next, and they're given feedback on their options so that they can see how different situations might work. And then in Session 7, they have a similar kind of thing, but these are all first-person videos, so the idea is to get a sense that they are in those situations themselves. And this acts as a form of vicarious exposure to individuals, particularly if they are so anxious they're not ready to engage in those social situations themselves. And then Session 8 consisted of a summary of all of the materials throughout the 7 sessions, was done in a printable format so that individuals could take that away as a top-up. So to come back to the randomised control trial, in that original study we had 83 participants. And the trial tested the FaceIT programme against a face-to-face delivery of a similar form of intervention and also a no treatment control. So we had a fairly even mix of participants across those 3 different conditions, and there were no differences at baseline in terms of the different measures or demographics that we were measuring. We did several different outcome measures as part of this controlled trial, so that we had the hospital anxiety and depression scale, which was taken at baseline, post-intervention, and then again at 3 and 6 month follow-up. We use the Derriford Appearance Scale, the 24-item version, to assess fear of negative evaluation and social anxiety associated specifically with appearance. We use the fear of negative evaluation scale more generally to see how it correlated with the DAS. And we also use the body image quality of life inventory at the same points as well. And what we were hoping to achieve with this particular measure was to see whether or not the programme was tapping into social anxiety and concerns around interaction specifically, or whether it had a wider change in body image more generally. So in terms of the findings, we didn't find much of a change in depression from across the different time points, and there wasn't much of a change in the body image quality of life either. There was some change in the fear of negative evaluation, but this was explained very much more by the DAS, so I haven't gone into those particular measures today. This is a graph that shows the differences across the anxiety measures. So we have our pre-scores here reducing really nicely in this curve here down to 6 months for both the computer group, so this is the FaceIT program group, and also for the face-to-face group. And then we have our control group here, which is staying broadly similar across the different time points, as we might imagine. So this was exactly what we were hoping to see. As we can see here, the lines are pretty similar for the face-to-face group and for the for the computer group, the FaceIT group, with the face-to-face delivery of the intervention being slightly more effective than the online delivery, which is again what we would expect to see in terms of delivery. So what we were trying to achieve with the FaceIT program was not to replace face-to-face delivery, but to provide an additional form of intervention. So we were expecting that it would not necessarily be quite as effective, but it was still statistically significant changes over time. And what was really nice to see was that quite often what you see with the online interventions is that you see a nice drop off pre to post, but then the results start to either trail off, or actually there's an increase then in symptoms over the next 3 to 6 months. But actually what we see in this one is the same as what we see in face-to-face, is that there continues to be a reduction in the anxiety scores, which suggests that in both the face-to-face delivery and the FaceIT group, individuals were continuing to use these social skills in their day-to-day lives after intervention. And what we see is a very similar effect then for the Derriford Appearance Scale, so the measure of appearance concern. So again, we have a nice flat line for our control group, and we have a significant reduction in appearance concerns for both our FaceIT group and our face-to-face delivery over the course of intervention and then into follow-up. And again, we see that increasing reduction, suggesting that people are continuing to use the skills provided to them. What we have on the side of the screen here are different quotes for people that took part in the randomized control trial in terms of their experiences of using the program. One of the other things that we did as part of the trial was we asked them at post-intervention to rate their acceptability of the FaceIT program. So it was important to us not only to develop an intervention that we need to be effective, but also something that we knew would be acceptable to individuals in the real world. So we asked them to rate the acceptability, the overall usefulness and satisfaction of the program. So usefulness and satisfaction were out of a maximum score of 10, where 10 being the most positive it could be. And the acceptability rating was out of 60. So as you can see, we've got for the computer and delivery and the face-to-face, so FaceIT and then the face-to-face delivery, we've got similar acceptability scores in the high 50s. In the low 50s, and then we also have both for usefulness and satisfaction, nice high marks for both the face-to-face delivery and for FaceIT itself. We then asked individuals to say which they would have preferred. So this was across the board. It didn't matter if they were in the control group, the face-to-face group, or the FaceIT group. We asked them what their preference for intervention would have been. And what we see is that it was a roughly even split between computer and face-to-face delivery. And it wasn't necessarily the choice, the individuals who had been put in that particular group who chose that particular aspect. So, for example, we found that it was a fairly even split in terms of those that did the FaceIT program as to whether they would have preferred to do face-to-face instead, or were actually more happy to be doing the online. And a similar thing seemed to be the case for the face-to-face group. What we did see was that it seemed to be that men particularly were more comfortable using the FaceIT program than the face-to-face delivery, whereas women preferred overall the face-to-face delivery. And then the final question that we asked them at post-intervention was whether or not they would find it acceptable if they were offered it. So if we think back to our hierarchy of different intervention levels, what we wanted to see was if there were no other forms of intervention currently available to individuals, would they accept the computer-based program if it was offered to them? And thankfully, what we saw was that 90% of the participants in the trial said that yes, they would definitely have accepted it. Thank you for listening. This was the second part of 2 videos looking at the creation and the design process of the FaceIT Home tool. We will be producing another video looking at the future developments of the FaceIT Home project and looking at how we might be able to improve access to people with visible differences in the future. So please keep an eye out on our YouTube channel or join us on other social media platforms such as Facebook or Twitter. Thank you.